This is Think Out Loud on OPB. I'm Dave Miller. The Portland City Council recently made changes to the so-called arts tax. It was approved by voters back in 2012 as a flat per-person tax. Everyone 18 and older who makes more than $1,000 has to pay $35. The proceeds go to public school art programs and to arts nonprofits. Under the changes, fewer people will have to pay, but those who do pay will have to pay more. We're going to dig into the details and the arguments against this change right now. Jamie Dunphy put the plan forward. He is a council member from District 1, that's East Portland, and the president of the Portland City Council. Steve Novick voted against the change. He is a council member from District 3. That includes most of inner and middle Southeast Portland and a piece of Northeast Portland. It's great to have both of you back on the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Jamie Dunphy, I want to start with you. What are the problems that you were trying to solve with the changes to the arts tax?
Yeah, the arts tax has been fundamentally flawed since it was first passed. Being a flat tax, it's incredibly regressive. Having a $1,000 threshold meant that we were going after babysitters and part-time gig workers. And with inflation, it meant we were collecting a lot less money. $35 in 2026 simply paid for a lot fewer teachers than it did in 2012. And this year was the first year where actually the grants that were going to artists were reduced by 44% because it was collecting less dollars and the extra money was going to the school districts. The tax was poorly crafted. It didn't have good definitions. It didn't have standard language in terms of how it aligns with other taxes and things like that. And over the next few years, it was going to get worse to the point where we knew that it would not even be able to afford to pay for the teachers alone. So I wanted to find a way to increase public transparency and accountability, fix our definitions and standardize them, and meet the moment where we are to actually follow through with what the voters intended rather than what was actually written.
Steve Novick, you said at a hearing last month that, quote, the arts tax is stupid. That is, what, 5 words right there? That's my math, right? Yeah, 5 words. Is that a short way of saying a version of what you just heard from your council president?
Kind of. I would add that the arts tax is fundamentally flawed in that it's a standalone tax, so people have to pay it separately. It's also collected separately, which means that we spend $2 million a year on administrative costs, which is about 1/6 of the total amount that the tax raises. Those are very serious problems. It is also a very serious problem that even after Councilor Dunphy's reform, somebody making $21,000 a year will pay the same amount as somebody making $1 million a year. And Councilor Dunphy's reform actually increased the tax for somebody making $21,000 a year.
I should say, I said it increased. I didn't say the number yet because I wanted to get straight to the conversation. So it was $35 if we're talking about per person, individual filers. Now it's $50. So a significant per person increase. And that's why, Steve, you're saying that whether it's $21,000 a year or $1 million, that person is paying the same amount. It's $50.
Right. And I mean, I guess it's nice that somebody making it is nice that somebody making $16,000 a year will no longer pay. But I don't think the way to fix that is to increase taxes on people making $21,000 a year. I think that the best way to deal with the arts tax is to fold it into another existing tax, therefore eliminating the administrative costs and also cutting taxes for most people. And what I would suggest is that we fold it into the children's levy, since it's largely for children anyway. And we make that the children's and arts levy. And what I would suggest is that the council pass legislation repealing the arts tax, period, and then send something to the voters saying, if you want to continue to give arts money to the schools and to arts organizations, then approve a 12-cent, a 21 cent per thousand increase to the children's levy, which for the typical single-family home would be about $50 a year. If you happen to be a single person making, with a single-family home, that would be the same amount you pay under Councilor Dunphy's reform, but you wouldn't have the annoyance of paying the tax. But most single-family homes have at least 2 working people, so they'd only be paying $50 a year combined, or $25 a year per person. The reason for that is that if you do a property tax, then businesses have to pay too, and also people with mansions would pay more. What I was giving was a figure for like a medium value home.
If you did ask Portlanders that question right now, the short version is, yes or no, do you want to pay more money in taxes in parentheses, the money will go for kids and art. How do you think a majority of Portlanders would respond?
I don't know, but actually you wouldn't be asking them to pay more in taxes. You'd be saying, we are eliminating the arts tax. So if you pass this, the vast majority of you will be paying less than you would pay under the arts tax. But you would get to retain the money for schools and for the arts organizations.
In your plan, would the repeal happen no matter what?
The
answer to that question does have a bearing on the framing of rolling this into the children's levy.
I would recommend that the repeal would happen no matter what, because otherwise I'd be worried that people would think that we were as a bait and switch and we actually wouldn't repeal the tax.
The reason I asked that is it is a tax increase from the new status quo.
No, it's not. What I'm proposing is a 50% tax cut for most people from the new status quo.
For most people, so you like Jamie Dunphy would be changing the baseline in terms of who pays?
Well, what you pay through your property taxes, but what I checked was what would it cost a typical single family homeowner, and that would be about $50 a year. Since most single-family homes contain at least 2 working people, then for each person it would be about $25 a year. So it would be, for most people, about a 50% tax cut from the new structure.
Jamie Dunphy, what do you think about this plan? Then I do want to dig into the details of the change that actually was approved 7-5. But what do you think of Steve Novick's plan?
I think Steve is brilliant, and I think Steve is probably onto a fundamentally better model that would have worked better if circumstances were different. I spent over a year working on this specific reform, working with both state, county, and city revenue departments, with artist groups, with school districts, and ultimately, I would love for some of these things to be automatic. I would love for some of these things to be collected on your tax bill or have it collected the way other taxes are. The state told us no. The county told us no. We tried to find ways to reform this. We looked at other directions to try and make this happen in better ways to get the same outcome of having 133 full-time equivalent art teachers teaching 125,000 kids in Portland. And I'm unwilling to sacrifice that right now.
When you say that the state and the county told you no, they said no to doing it unilaterally, or they said no that you can't ask voters about their making this change?
That we can't ask voters if we can't refer something to the ballot that says the state or the county shall collect on our behalf.
Yes, we can. Every time we send a property tax, like we sent the parks levy to the ballot last year, that gets collected through the county and the city combined.
I hear that.
The state and the county definitely did not say that we could not fold this into the children's levy.
They didn't say that, no, but they did tell me specifically that this tax, as it's written, could not be collected that way, and it couldn't be collected through property taxes. But there is certainly reforms that could make this different. I found this to be the most defensible path forward, but I don't disagree with Steve's fundamental statement here.
I want to understand a little bit better how you arrived at some of these numbers.
Yeah.
So as I said earlier, it was the bar until these changes has been everybody who makes $1,000 or more pays $35.
Let me just point out, if you file something showing that you live in poverty, then you don't have to pay. Poverty for a single person is $15,900 a year. So, of course, you'd have to file a form, but it's not like everybody who makes $1,000, if that's their sole income, would pay.
Okay. But you upped that to $20,000 a year for single filers, $40,000 for joint filers. How did you arrive at that level, those levels?
Yeah, well, we started with the idea, the fact that $35 doesn't pay as much, and what would the tax be if it had followed inflation? And that came out to be about $50 per person. But we didn't want to dramatically increase the pot of dollars that we're collecting. It takes about $9 million for teachers and artists and things like that. So we worked with the figure of $50. How do we get to $9 million? What is the income threshold at that point? And it worked out to be roughly $20,000 in Oregon taxable income or $40,000 for a family, which that is after tax deductions. And just for the record, that means that the majority of people who live in District 1 will not actually have to pay this tax at all, because the average income for a family in District 1 is $65,000. And after tax deductions and things, it actually puts most families at under $40,000. So we're actually seeing 44% of families who would have had to pay this previously no longer have to pay it.
But because of those, the two changes in combination, significantly lowering the number of people who are paying and increasing what the rest of folks will have to pay, you're basically keeping as you said, intentionally keeping the pot of money the same. But you started by saying that there's not enough money.
Right.
So if you're going to go through these changes, why not actually say, because of inflation, because of what's happened over the last 14 years, we actually need to bring in more money to give kids and arts organizations after them what voters promised.
Yeah, we will. It is now tied to inflation.
But the way, unless my understanding of tying to inflation works, that just means that you're not going to decrease the effective amount of money going forward, but it'll be where it is now, and then it'll keep up over the years with this lower amount than what would have been brought in 13 years ago.
No. It's the equivalent of what we would have been bringing in to fully pay for teachers and to still meet the requirements for artists, as we've been doing. We restored the cuts that were given to artists because we had some money in reserves. But going forward, this pot will be stable and able to meet the inflation of increasing cost of teachers across the different 7 school districts, and still continue to be able to meet artists. So that was the point, is get it to a stable point, meet where we are, don't make a dramatic increase in the available pot, and make sure that it is stable going forward so that kids continue to have education. That was my whole point, ultimately.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking right now about the recent changes to the Portland arts tax. Jamie Dunphy put the plan forward. He is the president of the Portland City Council. Steve Novick voted against the change. He is a council member from District 3. Steve, I want to go back to you and maybe zoom out for a second to understand your overall sort of political philosophy here. Clearly, you're against many aspects of this arts tax, and you've put forward what you see as a better version of a taxing system to accomplish the goal in a better way. But it also seems like you don't think the specific changes that Jamie Dunphy and a majority in the council put forward are bad. It seems, if I'm hearing you correctly, it seems like you do think that they are better than the old version. Although, as you said a couple weeks ago, it's not even lipstick on a pig. You don't think that, you think a pig is smarter than this thing. But what I'm wondering is, why
to give
not?
The full quote, what I said is, this is a situation where I think the phrase putting lipstick on a pig is insulting to pigs because pigs are smart and the arts tax is stupid.
Yeah, okay. I gave the short version of that. I think I captured the spirit of it. But what I'm wondering is why you voted against changes that might incrementally improve the arts tax on the way towards a wholesale rethink.
I don't think that the way to fix a tax that charges people who make $16,000, $35 is to increase the tax on people who make $21,000 a year. And one thing that I should point out is, because of something called the public meetings law, no councilor can talk to more than 5 other councilors about an idea they have. So Councilor Dunphy didn't talk to me about the fact that he was trying to reform the arts tax, because that would have been he talked to too many councilors. So we didn't have this conversation as he was developing his proposal.
Are there not ways to share? I'd be curious about that. This is an important, broader point about the way city government works. Wait, but if you have some idea that can you write an op-ed? Can you put it on a blog? Can you? I mean, the idea that the members of the council can't know what you'd like to do in a productive way, so you can bounce ideas off each other. That doesn't seem like a help. I mean, I understand in general the prohibition against meeting in secret and having stuff that's of substance happen behind closed doors.
Yeah.
But shouldn't there be a way for you all to know what you're thinking?
There should be.
I mean, once the Councilor Dunphy's proposal went to committee, I knew about it, but then he'd been working on it for months.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that we could do my idea now. We'd have to get on the stick because we'd have to send a proposal to the voters by July 22nd. But we could right now say, we are appealing the arts tax. If you want to keep the money going to schools and artists, then approve this change to the children's levy. We could send it at the ballot this November, and that would be the way people pay the arts tax next year, because it would be a children's levy, an arts levy. So if Councilor Dunphy's up for it, we could get on the stick and do that now.
What do you think of that idea?
I mean, I spent the last year working on this, and in some ways 10 years working on the position where I got to. I put an enormous amount of staff time and my own personal time into this, and I'm extremely proud of the reforms that we had. I think that there are some really good options out there for future conversations, and I think that Steve's is one of them. I'm not looking to rush this right now because, like I said, I spent the last year working on this proposal and finally got 6 of my additional colleagues to support it. I want to see if we can get this to be successful or not. But Councilor Novick is, of course, welcome to run his own bill. And, there's always different approaches. This is I just want to be clear, this is a philosophical conversation about policy. I totally appreciate where Steve is coming from on this and recognize that, these are hard conversations and hard choices, and we made one. We made a choice. And so I'm proud of where we landed.
I want to turn to the legal piece of this. As I'm sure you know, the Portland Metro Chamber said before the vote that if you go forward with this, then they intend to sue. Their basic argument is that the city does not have authority to unilaterally change this tax, to expand this tax or impose a new one. That's not what you're doing. You're expanding this tax. They say you can't do that under city charter, under legal precedent, without voter approval. As far as I've seen, that they have announced that they intend to sue. I don't know that they have actually filed a suit yet. I haven't seen that. But what's your response to their overall contention that you don't have the legal authority to do this?
We worked very closely with our attorneys. This has been changed administratively at least 6 times in the last 12 years. And it has always been stood up to legal scrutiny. I actually was in City Council when the last time the City Council got sued about this tax, and was there in the courtroom when it went to the Supreme Court and we were found to be able to do this. Our charter is new, and there are some questions about what our powers are. And if the Portland Metro Chamber really wants to file a suit over this, I think we will prevail. Our attorneys feel extremely confident that this is within our legal bounds.
Steve, do you agree?
Well, I think what the chamber is probably relying on is a fairly recent federal court decision that used some language in a 1915 Oregon Supreme Court decision that suggested that the Portland City Charter doesn't give the council broad taxing power. I do not think that would be the result if it went to the court today. I mean, that would mean that we'd have to throw out the business license tax, which is a big chunk of the city's revenues. So I do not think that the chamber's threat is a particularly frightening threat. It's not trivial, but I don't think it's particularly frightening.
Finally, we've been focusing almost entirely in this conversation so far on who will pay this tax and how much they'll pay. But Jamie Dunphy, you did talk at the beginning about problems with how the proceeds are spent, some of those definitions. So how will that change as a result of this recent vote?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things like a definition for high-quality arts education was missing.
That's something that a recent audit pointed out.
Yeah, we can define that. That's pretty straightforward. And it's a failure that we hadn't defined that. And it's also a failure that we hadn't really held the school districts accountable for what the contracts they had signed. When I worked in the old form of government under Nick Fish, I was the arts liaison, and I found out that for more than 10 years, we hadn't been having a regular meeting of all the superintendents that receive this. That's happening annually now. Those sort of basic accountability and transparency things are happening. Our formulas for calculating how much each teacher gets paid, what these can be used for. A lot of those improvements really are happening now in ways that work directly with the school districts to see how is this tax being implemented? How is it actually affecting kids? How is it affecting teachers? And we think we landed in a place that is really justifiable in all those areas.
Steve Novick, I want to give you a chance finally to respond to the questions of how the money is spent.
I think that, going to arts education in the schools is good. I think having some support for arts organizations is good. I will note that historically, it's been rich people that have funded the arts, like the Medicis with Michelangelo. So having poor people make $21,000 a year is kind of a historical departure. There's another thing I want to point out, which is that once politicians, quote, reform something, they tend to think, okay, we've reformed it. Now we don't have to worry about it for a while. I think that the arts tax is fundamentally flawed and needs to be dramatically reformed. I was afraid that if council passed this reform, they'd be resistant to the idea that we need to go back and make a more fundamental change like I'm suggesting.
Well, Jamie, so last word to you. I mean, what you said before is it's almost like I spent so much time, so much effort. We got to this, and it does seem like you're saying a version of what Steve is worried about. Or am I hearing you wrong?
I'm absolutely open to more changes on this, but I spent a year talking to the experts in the field about what is possible, and politics is the art of possible. We got something across the line. It was the most fundamental reform of any tax in the Portland history. It was the largest reduction in the number of payers of any tax, and it has set this tax up for success for the next foreseeable future, at the very least for the next 30 years that we can see, to make sure that my kid is going to have a continued arts education. I feel really good about where we landed. I would not be oppositional to more conversations about this. I do think that there is work that can be done. I do think that perhaps we should look at whether or not to make this more progressive and make it less of a burden for people on the lower end of the spectrum and more of a burden for people who can earn it. I do think that there is more work to be done, but I feel really proud of the work that has been done.
Jamie Dunphy and Steve Novick, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Jamie Dunphy is the president of the Portland City Council. Steve Novick is a council member from District 3. Our production staff includes Malia Fass, Rolly Hernandez, Gemma DiCarlo, senior producer Allison Frost, and managing producer Shiraz Sadiq. Naleen Silva and Layla Isbell engineer the show from the Gert Boyle studio. Our technical director is Stephen Cray, and our executive producer is Sage Van Wing. If you don't want to miss any of our shows, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Our nightly rebroadcast is at 8 p.m. Thanks very much for tuning in to Think Out Loud on OPB and KLCC. I'm Dave Miller. We'll be back tomorrow.
Think Out Loud is supported by Steve and Jan Oliva, the Rose E. Tucker Charitable Trust, Ray and Marilyn Johnson, the Susan Hammer Fund of Oregon Community Foundation, and the Lang Svingard Family Fund.